Hey, everybody, and welcome to another weekly episode of my chapter chats from my book, Stories from Webb, the book that I wrote with my team over at Webb Elementary in Navasota, Texas, just sharing stories about life, about families, and about some educational stuff as well. This week, I'm discussing Chapter 11. Chapter 11 is called When There's No Closure. And as educators and as just people in life, we go through different things in our lives where we don't always get that beautiful Hollywood happy ending, where things don't just wrap up. Sometimes some things in our lives completely end with no closure at all, where we're left with more questions than answers or more pain than celebrations. And so this chapter goes into talking about that. And one of the stories is from one of our pre-K teachers. Let me see if I can, there we go. One of our pre-K teachers, her name is Brenda Parker. And she talks about how she had a little boy in her class that had the same birthday as her granddaughter. And that he came in her class at the middle of the year. He was in foster care, so he had come under some difficult situation of a family that was trying to adopt him from the life that he had. And he was trying so hard to catch up with the rest of the kids that by the end of the year, he ended up flying way past them academically, and that he always did everything that was asked. He was the sweetest kid, even with all the difficulties going on outside of his life. And that from the day that he was born, he had been shuffled from place to place. And his birth mother was one of those that came into his life, but also then chose to step out off and on. And she talked about how, he went through that year and it was a great second semester. And during the summer, he was just very heavy on her heart and on her mind. And she called his foster mother and she was like, "Hey, I'm just calling to check in. I miss the kid. I just want to see how he's doing." And she said that it just broke her heart to hear that he had been taken away from the foster family and put with a family member in a different town. And all she could think was, here's another little boy that I just wish I could take home. I wish I could hold him. I wish I could give him this stable life. And she said that it was one of those where she found out later that it didn't work out with the relative. And finally, it got to a point where the birth mother gave up all rights to her child, and he finally was being adopted by a different family. And she talks about how, I don't know where he is now. I don't know how he's going to end up, but I just hope that the little time that he was with us, that he felt loved, that he felt important, and hopefully, maybe one day I'll get to see him again. And, as educators, we work with so many kids so often that come from all kinds of backgrounds. And it doesn't even matter. Socioeconomic status does not mean that they have a great life or they automatically have a terrible life. Every kid goes through trials just like every adult goes through trials. And when we connect with kids, sometimes for just a single year, we don't know where they end up. We don't know the impact. We're reading a book together as a staff right now. And one of my team members was telling me, she said, "I read this part and it just broke my heart." And I said, "What was it?" She said it was the part where the teacher was talking about a student and how she was a really difficult student and he couldn't figure out how to connect with her and everything like that. And then he ran into her a few years later in the store, and that she tried to not be seen by him. And she had a couple kids with her, and they ran up to him and gave him hugs and were hanging on his legs. And he said, "Hello, how's it going? I just wanted to check in with you." And she said, "Yeah, the year that I was in your class was really hard." She said, "My grandmother died and she was my closest friend, and none of you even knew. And nobody even took the time to find out that's what I was going through." And it was kind of like those, we never know what kids are going through. And we don't always get the perfect closure at the end of a year that a story ended up with a happy ending or any kind of ending at all. The story that I write about in this chapter is the end of our, I don't even remember what school year it was. It was 2 or 3 school years ago. It was the second to last day of school. Our last 2 days of school that year were both half days. So we got out at noon on a Thursday and sent the kids home. And then these crazy storms came in, like tornadoes. And with the staff was still there because it was a full staff workday. And so the staff we huddled in the middle of the school when one of the tornado warnings happened, and the kids weren't on campus. They were already at home. We're huddling there. We're freaking out. And then when it lifts, some of the staff was able to get home right after that. But for the rest of us, we were like, all the roads are flooded, or there's stuff down everywhere. And so I stayed there till about 7 o'clock that night. And then I was like, you know what? I think I can make it home. I'm in a small SUV. Let me go. And I tried to go out at like 5:30 just to see, and I couldn't make it more than a block from the school. So I came back to school, and then at 7 o'clock, I was like, I think they'll kind of drop. Let me see if I can make it home. 4 to 6 hours later, I finally made it home the 25 miles that I live from school because of the flooded bridges, flooded roads, and it was craziness. And then that night, because of all the flooding and the no electricity and down debris, school was canceled for kids that next day, the last day of school. So all those end of the year parties that we had planned, all those fun activities, those special awards, we didn't get to do any of it because they ended up making our day before the last day of school, and we had no idea. So we didn't have any kind of closure with the day, and it was heartbreaking. And especially as elementary teachers, we like live for that last day to celebrate with the kids and the awards and the gifts and everything that we give them to send them off on the summer and tell them we can't wait to see them again in the fall when they're in the next grade level. And it was devastating. And I remember my team coming up to me and teachers going, we can't end like this. We can't do this. And they got together, every single grade level team, and contacted all those families and said, next week, even though there's no school and we're not supposed to be at work, we're going to come up to school during these times so that you can bring your kids up because we would like to have a goodbye party. We would like to give you your end of the year awards. And to watch the parents stream in that next week was just a powerful moment. And even though it was really hard because some families still couldn't make it in during that time, I've never experienced not getting to have the end of a school year. But that's what teachers do. When things like that happen, they step up and they truly care about kids when they say, you know what, I'm going to give up my time now to make sure I get that time with them. The last story in this chapter is by one of our first grade teachers named Kelly LeBlue. And her story actually deals with the same thing, the same event, but from her perspective as a teacher and not my perspective as an administrator. And I love what she said. She said, those last goodbyes, they're not just a simple gesture for me. They symbolize my letting go of my precious lives who have become such a part of me. And during those goodbye hugs, I tell each child how important he or she was, how proud I was of them, and that they could always come to me if they needed anything. And she goes, when we thought we weren't going to get that moment, it broke me because I didn't have the closure with them. I didn't have those last goodbyes, those last hugs. And it reminds me of the same kind of thing of when somebody unexpectedly leaves our lives and your first thought is, I didn't tell them goodbye. Or what was the last thing I said? Or how did I treat them? And she ends with, last goodbyes now hold an extremely important place on my agenda. Losing a loved one is one of the hardest of the last goodbyes. However, my experiences in May of that year taught me that as I proceed through each school year, I need to remember to initiate the hugs and reassurances on a regular basis so that I will not regret the absence of a last goodbye. And I think that's the perfect way to end this week's chapter chat is sometimes we won't get that closure, so don't let a moment pass to tell someone how much you love them, how important they are to you, the difference they make on this world, because everybody wants to know they're loved. Everybody wants to know they're important. And don't let some kind of crazy event happen that provides no closure and takes away any opportunity for you to have told them how much they mean to you. Hope everybody has a great week this week. Find ways to encourage others around you and check back next Sunday for chapter 12 of Stories from Web, available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble now.